We're going to talk about foliar nutrition. If you apply nutrients to the leaf surface of a plant, if it's a properly blended foliar nutrient spray, then it can be up to 19 times more effective for nutrient uptake. If you apply a dry soil amendment or even a liquid soil amendment foliar, or a liquid nutritional amendment to the soil, then it still needs to go through a microbe to get to your plant. If it needs to be broken down further, if it's something that is soluble that can be brought into the soil solution and taken up through mass flow, then there are other things going on there that we might want to talk about. But ideally, your nutrients would make their way from the soil through a microbe to your plant. That's ideal for optimal plant health. But you can also spray the leaf surface of your plants with a foliar nutrient blend and get more efficiency out of that nutrient blend. I'm going to tell you how to do it. It's really simple, and we're going to talk about first a particular type of nutrient blend. This is one of my favorites. I don't think they'll mind if I promote their product. Advancing Eco Agriculture makes really good foliar nutrient products. They are well blended, very consciously produced. They are nutrients that are available but not soluble. And so the plant is able to utilize it. They're in such small particle size, colloidal particle size, that they can be held in solution, but they are not soluble. They don't have a high salt index. They're not going to damage your plant. And they're going to supply nutrients depending on what blend you choose or what suite of products you choose. They're going to supply just micro amounts of those nutrients directly to the plant through the leaf surface, and the plant then can utilize that for its metabolic function and translate some of that to the soil microbes if needed. So I'm using a blend that has 4 different products blended together to cover the photosynthetic nutrients, to cover the reproductive nutrients, and to cover some of the vegetative nutrients. It is a blend that's called the Forage Foliar Blend. It has calcium, phosphorus, it has sulfur, has a little bit of magnesium, it has manganese, copper, zinc, cobalt, molybdenum, a broad suite of nutrients. But 2 nutrients, primary essential nutrients that are missing from this blend are going to be potassium and nitrogen. And that's a good thing, because we want to orient our vegetative fades towards calcium. We don't want to apply nitrogen too early. We don't want to apply nitrogen in a quantity that might shut down calcium uptake, really focusing on a calcium-centric vegetative phase, utilizing other dry soil amendments to promote that as well, and other techniques like using a diverse cover crop or using legumes early in the season, which will have an acidic root zone that can help break a calcium and phosphorus bond early in the season, utilizing inoculants that have mycorrhizal spores in them. We've talked about that in the past, but endomycorrhizal fungi are really good at working with a community of bacteria that are really good at solubilizing phosphorus, which releases calcium. Calcium and phosphorus bond together pretty tightly. They make a rock mineral when they are close to each other in alkaline soils. We want to make sure our plants have plenty of calcium, so we're not going to apply nitrogen in any serious quantity early in the season, especially not nitrate or especially not nitrate. We can apply a little bit of amino acids, we can apply a little bit of fish hydrolysate, and we'll talk about that. We're also not going to apply potassium too early in the season, because that is more of a cell expansion nutrient and it can block calcium uptake. So I like to use this one particular foliar blend because it doesn't have nitrogen and it doesn't have potassium, or not a significant amount of either. So that is one thing, is getting a well-blended foliar product. Number 2 is using a clean water source. And so when I say a clean water source, I'm going to be meaning either rainwater. So if you have rain catchment, wonderful, utilize rainwater. If you don't have rainwater, consider, if you want to get that full efficiency out of that foliar product, they're expensive. And they're expensive to ship, they're liquids, they're heavy. So don't waste them by using a municipal water source to apply them. In a lot of municipal water, you're going to have excess nutrients like calcium, magnesium, nitrate. You're going to have carbonates, bicarbonates. All of those can bind to the nutrients in that foliar product and lock them up and keep them away from your plant so you don't get full use of that foliar nutrition. So use a clean water source. So that's going to be rainwater, reverse osmosis water, or distilled water if you can. I know it's not always practical to do either of those, especially if you're not near a water source like that. Rainwater is the preferred. I have rainwater in here. It's only, you know, this tank is a 2.5 gallon tank, but I've only got a gallon of water in here. Rainwater. Ideal. Use your rainwater. You only need a small amount of water to cover a pretty large area. We've got about a, I don't know, 30 by 75. If this area was fully planted and in its intensive growth phase, it would take 1 gallon of water to cover all 25 of these beds. 1 gallon. And it's, you know, just a small amount of nutrient that we're utilizing. And so consider just bringing in a gallon of clean water, whatever it is, to do your foliar nutrient spray if you're dealing with a small space. If you're dealing with a large space, that's a totally different equation. So I've got this pump sprayer. I've had it for years. You can see that it's got a little bit of residual material. Keep your sprayer clean, rinse it out after you utilize it. That will keep you from having clogs, keep you from having biofilms that might cause you to have complications with your foliar nutrient spray later. This particular foliar nutrient spray, just use the label rates that are recommended for your nutrient spray. We can connect on that later. Certainly do check out Advancing Eco Agriculture for their products. I think they are some of the best. There are some other really great products out there as well. I'm going to put about a tablespoon, a little bit more of this particular blend in my 1 gallon of rainwater. That's enough. Label rate, small area. I know how much water it's going to take to cover the area. We're in mid-May. So right now, our plants are in their vegetative phase. They're in their structuring phase. If I had all of these beds transplanted and they were, you know, starting to get a little bit of size on them, I would consider adding in some fish hydrolysate. I wouldn't do that right at planting or transplanting. I'm not going to put it in my transplant solution because it has phosphoric acid in it, which is a plant available or soluble phosphorus source. So I want to avoid that right at the beginning of that plant's establishment phase because I don't want to get in the way of the mycorrhizal colonization. Soluble phosphorus is detected by a plant. The plant has the ability to detect what nutrients are soluble and available to it in the soil rhizosphere. Whether it's a germinating seed, a transplanted plant, or a mature plant, they can detect what nutrients are available to them and they make decisions accordingly. In order for that plant to send out the hormones, dragalactone, in order to cause that mycorrhizal species to break dormancy, that spore to break dormancy, and to come over, be invited to colonize that plant, you can't have soluble phosphorus in solution around that seed. It doesn't need to know there's phosphorus available to it. So don't use your fish hydrolysate early. Don't put it in your transplant solution. Don't use it too early. Wait until your plants are starting to put on some vegetative growth, starting to structure, then utilize your fish hydrolysate as your nitrogen source. Fish hydrolysate is a wonderful nitrogen source that you can apply as a foliar. You can also utilize it as a fertigation through your drip irrigation or with a watering can. Use your label rate or half your label rate early in the season and then work up to your label rate. But fish hydrolysate is a product that is produced through microbial digestion. It goes through a fermentation. So all of the fats, the proteins, amino acids, peptides, they're all in here. Everything is in here. So it's a complex food or a complex, nitrogen source. It's not soluble nitrogen. There will be a little bit of soluble nitrogen in there, but not much. Use your label rate. I use my fish hydrolysate, if needed, every other feed. I'm gonna put about a tablespoon in there. Just a little bit, right? So plants need to be fed every day. The 24-hour cycle, they're being fed by the microbes all the time. You can come in and give them a little boost every 7 to 10 days. That's where this foliar nutrition is going to come in. If your soil is not is not diverse enough to have the microbes that would provide iron. It needs to be in a reduced form. If you don't have the microbes that are going to provide reduced manganese, which is critical for the first phases of photosynthesis, iron is critical for photosynthesis. If you don't have the microbes that are going to oxidize the sulfur, you know, if you don't have those microbes already in place, working, active, not dormant, then you might want to utilize a well-blended foliar spray. And do that every 7 to 10 days. I've got clean water, 1 gallon, a little bit of this foliar nutrient. I'm going to set my pump sprayer up, build pressure just by pumping the pump sprayer. Again, using a foliar spray is up to 19 times more effective than going through the soil first. Shake it up, make sure it's well blended. And then you're just going to go around at this time of the evening. A little bit earlier than this, but past peak sun. Don't apply your foliar nutrient in the peak sun. Plants are photosynthesizing during the day. They're not taking up nutrients during the day. Don't stress them out by just putting a opaque liquid on their leaves. Reserve that for the evening after peak sun. So right now, mid-May, that can be 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, depending on where you are in the world. It would be the opposite in the southern hemisphere, but after peak sun, make your application again. We're feeding weekly, meaning dilutely, small amounts, frequently. So every 7 to 10 days. Every other feed, add in your fish hydrolysate if needed, and look for the visual symptoms. Do a little Googling and find out what the visual symptoms of a deficiency are for this particular plant. We've got a garlic plant that's obviously showing in my mind, a little bit of a potassium deficiency. So I'm probably going to come in with a little bit of potassium, but I'm going to start first with this blend and see if we can't take care of that. The manganese in this blend might open up the flow of potassium, can act like a barometer for potassium. So I'm just going to give these little guys a little nutrient spray, and that's all it is. So these are a bladed leaf. So I'm actually getting the top and the bottom of the leaf, but if you're spraying a tomato plant, if you're spraying a lettuce plant, if you're spraying a celery plant, whatever you're spraying, just coat the plant lightly and you're done. Yes, it's great to get it on the bottom of the leaf because that's where the stomata are, and you might get some more nutrient uptake that way, but don't stress yourself out about it. Spray your fruit trees, spray everything that's around. The timing is similar. If you are dealing with fruiting crops, and we'll go over this again a little later in the season, if you are dealing with fruiting crops like your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your beans that are actually past pollination, then you want to add in a little bit of soluble kelp, dry soluble kelp. Dry soluble kelp is processed or extracted with a potassium hydroxide, which will end up making your soluble kelp about 15% potassium. It's a great plant available foliar applied potassium source, and you also get all of the hormones and nutrients, that broad suite of nutrients that are in the sea, that broad suite of plant hormones that kelp contain. You'll get all of that, plus that extra little boost of potassium that can help swell those fruits. We don't want to apply our potassium too early. We want to wait until after pollination, after cell division, because that's calcium mediated. Then after, 5 days after pollination, depending on the crop you're dealing with, fruit trees are different, berries are different. Just do a little Googling and find out when their cell expansion phase kind of goes to a close. It's continual, it's gradual, it's a gradient, but don't start your potassium too early. We don't want to block the calcium because they're both cations, positively charged. They can block each other. So bring your potassium in, your soluble kelp, dry powdered soluble kelp with about a 15% potassium, 0015 is what you'll see on the analysis on the label, and bring that in. You can put, in a gallon of water, just start with 1/4 of a teaspoon of that soluble kelp. It'll turn this liquid pretty dark. It'll look, like a cup of coffee. It'll look pretty dark, and that's okay. Think about when you're going to harvest and when you're going to present this vegetable. If it's going to market, then think about that. Don't spray this dark liquid on the day before you're about to harvest. Get a couple waterings in, some overhead waterings or rain or something like that to kind of do that pre-wash. Of course, wash your veggies before you sell them. all of the needed food safety, but just think about the dark liquid consideration when you're doing your foliar sprays, and don't save this. So I was saying, you know, go around and spray everything. Spray your fruit trees, spray your berries, spray everything that needs a little extra boost, because once you've diluted this in water, it's a feeding frenzy in there, especially if you're using rainwater. So go ahead and utilize it. And if you don't utilize it, if you have a small garden and you mixed up a gallon, go feed it to your perennials, pour it on the ground near your perennials, put it in your compost pile. Don't save it. It's not going to be the same quality tomorrow. So that's a foliar feed, really simple, but very efficient nutrient application. It's a multivitamin for your plants that you can give them whenever you think they need it.